Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the series Yoga Poses Explained. Probably you've already seen the videos about low crescent lunge and high crescent lunge. And today we're going to look at the next following pose, which is Warrior One. So there are different types of warriors in yoga, and the one we're going to look at today is called Warrior One. Although there's not actually a specific order, so that means the warrior poses, they don't have to be practiced in the order Warrior 1, Warrior 2 or 3 and so on. You can practice them at any time that you feel they are suitable. So Warrior 1 is a standing pose and therefore often practiced in the beginning or in the middle of a vinyasa class, but feel free to put it anywhere you like. So let's begin. Warrior One is often started from a downward facing dog. So let's say we could be here and then rise up with one leg and place the foot in between our hands. Now the first challenge we have is that this way we won't be able to rise up into Warrior One. So we have to bring the other foot a little bit closer so we can come up here to the pose. So what is typical for this pose? Warrior One is often not as deep as Warrior Two. Just for comparison, this would be Warrior Two, so I'm much further down here. Warrior One, we are a little bit closer with the feet. The foot that is in front is facing forward, and the knee should be just above the ankle. What we shouldn't do is go that much forward with the knee that it's tipping over the toes. So the question is often in Warrior One, how are the hips being positioned? And this is actually a good question. The foot that is behind is facing in about 45 degrees angle outwards. So with this position of the foot, it's practically impossible to have the hips 100% facing forward. Okay, so anyone who's telling you that, anatomically it's impossible. So if we have the heel down on the mat and the foot facing outward a little bit, our hips are slightly turned to the right in this position. But they are not as far open as they would be in Warrior Two, just for comparison. Here, my hips are really facing to the side. This is not the case in Warrior One. So if I'm coming back here, my hips are more or less facing forward, but not exactly all the way to the front. So this is the explanation of the hips. Now, in order to keep the heel down on the mat, most people would have to take a slightly shorter step, because if I'm back here, I need to be super flexible to keep the heel down on the mat, and I will also tend to have too much weight on the foot just to press down the foot, and that's not the intention of the asana. So I prefer to have the feet a bit closer and not go as deep as some people do, because this is also a bit more beneficial for the knee. Otherwise you might overstretch and twist your knee. And the arms, usually they're all the way up and kept here. We're also paying attention to the position of the shoulders. They should never be pulled up, because then we might be in a cramp very soon in the neck. So the arms are just facing up. They don't have to be super extended, just in a comfortable position. Let me show you the pose from the other side. Now, for people who are struggling to keep the balance in this pose, what you can offer is that they step a bit further apart. So what do I mean by that? If we're looking at our feet, they can be almost in one line. Some people can do that, but some simply cannot. Here we also have to keep in mind that the pelvis is quite wide, especially a woman's pelvis. So the feet will never be on the same place below the pelvis. Then the legs would always be in a slightly tilted position. So if we're thinking about the neutral standing position, our feet are not in one line. They're both facing the same direction, but they're not in one line. So if we step forward with the foot that is later on going to be in front, and then we just turn the other foot outward, we see that there is a certain distance in between. So for people who are struggling with balance, we can make the whole pose a little bit wider. So we're rather stepping on the outer edge of the mat with the foot that is in front, and then give some more space for the foot that is in the back. What we have to pay attention here is that we're not going over the foot with the knee. So then I would recommend to come back a little bit with the knee and have the weight in the middle basically. And then we can rise up here with the arms. With the arms you can actually have the same variation as with every other pose, but usually they are on top or they can be on the side, as this is a standing pose. Now, what is it for? The warrior one is often included in a vinyasa flow. So this can be either before or after other warrior poses. It is a standing pose. So there are actually not many counterindications for people who can't practice this pose. There's always the option to make it easier by making the step a little bit shorter. So then it's actually almost a regular standing position for our body. So we neither need to be super flexible nor super experienced to practice this pose. People who have knee problems, like menisci or problems with the joint, I would recommend not to turn the foot outwards too much. They might as well just stay almost in the same direction as the foot facing forward, because then we don't have so much rotation in the knee. In general, for standing poses, it is recommended to keep the arms down if we have participants who are suffering from high blood pressure. So if they bring up their arms all the time, they might experience some vertigo. But other than that, for Warrior One, there are actually no major counterindications. Of course, it's always best to talk to your students if they have individual issues, but it's actually a rather easy pose to practice. Where do I include this pose in a practice? I prefer to have this in the beginning. I like to start in a vinyasa class with a few standing flows, and I would place this pose rather in the beginning of a standing sequence. It's a easier standing pose, and you have a lot of options to add other warrior poses afterwards. And it's also a pose that can be practiced when we are not warmed up yet, or not warmed up well enough yet to practice the more flexible poses. So thank you very much for joining, and I hope to see you again next time when we are talking about Warrior 2. Thank you and namaste.